I want to thank our elder Kim for the kind introduction and the very gentle interview. It's always good to be interviewed by the church, and it is a blessing for me to be here following the footsteps of Pastor Dennis Hankinson. If you know my story, Pastor Dennis Hankinson has played a really important role in me coming into ministry. He has been my mentor, and whenever I get frustrated with people or with ministry or with myself, he's one of the person that I call. And so he's been there, and he's been, and I think coming to a church after him or following him to this church, I think they're really big shoes to fill, not just the physical size, right? They are big shoes to fill. Yes, Sandra? Oh, thank you. But one thing that I can say God is good to this church is that for a few years you won't have to look up so high. You can look straight at me or you can look down to me, right? Because, following Pastor Dennis, I remember those days when we used to meet with Dennis. One thing that stood out is whenever we have a meeting and I go home, I could feel my neck hurting. And I didn't know why it was. But then I thought, why is this happening to me? Is it because I'm talking to him? But then I found out that when I was talking to him, I always have to look so far up because he's so tall, right? So God is good. He has released your neck pains for a few years for now. Thank you. And so this morning I want to talk to you about faith in the midst of uncertainty. There are three types of people. The people that are not certain about anything in life. They go about life and think, what's going to happen? Am I going to get there? Is this relationship going to work? Am I going to be able to finish this school or the course that I'm studying? And then you have the other side, the other person that goes, I know what I want to achieve, and I'm going to achieve it in this certain period of time, right? And there are those of us who are neither on either side. Is it good to be certain about everything? Or can we be certain about everything? Or is it healthy to be uncertain about everything? Regardless of which camp you are, you know that there are pros and cons to each side, right? If you're too certain about a relationship, and when that relationship breaks down, what happens? You end up with a heartache or heartbreak. Or when you're too uncertain about, for example, bringing up your child. I look at this 6-year-old and I think to myself, am I doing a good job? When she turns 18, when she can drive a car by herself, will she still want to be in church? Am I certain about that? Or am I already worrying about something that I have no control over? So this morning I want to find that out with you as we talk about what the Word of God says about having faith in the midst of uncertainty. So, all right, let me see if this works. Okay. It's showing green, so it should be on, right? Yeah. Thank you. I was certain it was going to work, but I guess it didn't. Thank you, Ephraim. So, the January 20th is coming, and what do you think is happening on the 20th of January? Anyone knows? 20th of January, Who is taking presidency in America? Trump is taking presidency. I will not ask you to raise your hands if you're feeling positive or whether you're not feeling so positive about this. But what do you think is going to happen to the world around us? Will there be peace in the Middle East? Will he be able to resolve the Ukraine and Russia situation within 24 hours as he promised? Will America be great again? And if so, what's going to happen with Australia too? Right? These are some things that are in our minds that sometimes we have, sometimes that we think over, that we sweat over, but we have no control over. So the text here in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 to 6, it shows us that we are to trust in the Lord with how much of our heart? All of our heart, and lean not to our own understanding. And in all our ways, we are to acknowledge or submit to Him. And if we do that, He will make our path straight. Let me just share this beautiful story with you. What you're seeing is an African impala. It has the ability to jump 10 feet up. It can jump as high as 10 feet. And it can cover a distance of greater than 30 feet. But you can keep this animal in the zoo with a 3-foot wall. Why do you think that is? It has the capacity to jump at least 10 feet high, but you can keep it in a zoo with a 3-foot wall. And the reason is because it cannot see what is beyond that 3 foot. And because it's not certain where he would land, right? If he jumps and crosses that 3-foot barrier, what's going to happen to him? He doesn't know, therefore, he is enclosed in the zoo by a 3-foot wall. Isn't that what happens to us as Christians as well? Sometimes uncertainty takes over our lives so much that we are afraid to live out our faith, to walk out in faith. Yeah? Our God, we serve a God that created the whole universe. We serve a God who is powerful above everything else, who is knowledgeable above everything else, but because we are so confined by what limits us that we are afraid to live out in faith. And so this is a really good reminder of who we are, what we are, but we're more than what we are because of the capacity that God has given into us through the work of the Holy Spirit. So uncertainty, it clouds our judgment, and it also limits our capabilities. So today, this morning, or is it still morning? Or it's afternoon now. We want to explore trusting God's wisdom in the midst of unpredictability, and also how faith in God provides stability when the world around us feels chaotic or out of control. And so, faith in the midst of uncertainty. We are to trust God's wisdom even when things are unpredictable. Faith in God provides stability in our lives, even when everything around us seems like it is all out of control. So how do we trust God's wisdom even when things are not predictable? How do we trust God's wisdom? Proverbs chapter 3, 5 to 6, it is said to be a cornerstone of wisdom literature, right? We know what the cornerstone means, right? It is a stone that we look and we measure up with so that we could build the entire building. And so it says that this Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 to 6 is a cornerstone of wisdom literature. If we are to have wisdom, live our lives according to wisdom, live with wisdom, this is something that we need to look at and measure our lives with. So it comes with three things. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. What does that mean? Trusting in the Lord with all my heart. It is New Year's, or we are 2 weeks into the new year. I don't know how many of you are still 100% with your New Year resolutions. I didn't have one, so I'm perfect. But trusting in the Lord means having complete faith, complete confidence in God. Not partial, not conditional. And I think this is something that we should aspire to. We don't know what the next 10, 20 minutes of our lives brings, but one thing we can be certain of is that God can be trusted. Second, lean not to your own understanding. Why not? Right? Isn't that the question young people pose to us? Lean not. You don't know enough. It's almost like talking to my little girl. She is 6, as you all know by now. I'd say, Ruth, when we cross the road, hold my hand. And if I say go, look at the lights. When I say go, we'll go. And she'd look at me and say, why? And I said, why? Because I know more than you. And she'd say, well, my teachers taught me in school, what to do in green light, yellow, and red. And I said, well, I have 40 years more experience than you, right? We as fathers look at our children, we go, I have lived this much longer than you, right? But the person that is asking us to trust him with all our heart is not our humanly mother or father, but a God who created this world into existence. So can we trust him? We definitely can. And so, thirdly, it says, in all your ways, submit to him. Submitting, surrendering every area of our lives to God's authority. And if we do so, the promise is this: God will make your path straight. Many of us have strayed from the path and have returned, right? And therefore, sometimes when I see young people no longer coming to church and losing interest in church and in God and anything that has to do with religion, sometimes what I say to myself is, well, the time has come. But the time will come when they will want to return as well, right? Because that's what we have done. I myself has done that. I was born into a pastor's family. My father was a pastor. But for nearly 10 to 15 years of my life, I didn't want anything to do with God, the church, or with Christianity at all. But it's amazing how God directs our path in different ways and creates new paths as He has promised us in the Psalms, right? He says, I am making a way in the wilderness. I am making a river in a barren land or in a desert. And such as that, yes, God is able to make your path straight regardless of where you are now, because He's that God that creates paths leading back to Him. And so, if we trust in the Lord with all our heart, lean not to our own understanding, and submit to Him in all our ways, the God of the universe, the God that sent His only Son to be the path, to be the way, to be the life, He is more than able to make your path straight. A path that leads back to Him. And so, we look at the life of Joseph, for example. We like the story of Joseph. We like the part that We like the part when he became a governor of Egypt, right? Or the prime minister of Egypt. But do we like the part where he was thrown into a ditch, sold as a slave, right? Or being sent to prison by a person that he's working for because he wouldn't sleep with the person's wife. For doing what is right, he went through so much. But because he trusted in God, he submitted to God, what did God do? God lifted him up to a position of power. God used him to save the lives of many. And that is what God can do with your life as well. Sometimes we look at these stories and we think, oh, they're just stories. But someone actually lived through it. Being right, doing the right thing will not always be rewarding. But in the end, God can use your brokenness, your suffering, the pain that you went through to save someone else's life. And that is the path, the straight path that the wisdom of Proverbs is teaching us today. And so, how can we make this a reality in our life? Daily trusting in God's wisdom and avoiding over-reliance on human wisdom. And isn't that why we come together as a church? To discuss weekly, is there God's wisdom for us this week? Right? In our Sabbath school lesson. We're looking at ourselves and we know that we are not capable, that we are limited by many things, but that God is not limited by anything. And so we look at faith. How does faith provide stability amid chaos? One thing that I really appreciated was, I don't know how many of you remember the days when terrorism was everywhere. There was news of terrorism in America, in the Middle East, some even in here in Australia. And I was blessed to be working in the social sector as a social worker and a settlement support worker with the new and emerging communities coming from Syria, Afghanistan, and all these different countries coming in. And when hearing of, when people hear so much of terrorist acts all around the world, it became the discussion during lunch times, right? People come together and all these social workers coming together. All we could talk about was, oh, another terrorist act over there, another one over here, right? One thing that I could never forget is a friend coming to me one day. She was a Catholic, or she is a Catholic, and she said, "Why do you seem so calm? When all these things are happening around us, and when we are serving people that are coming from those countries, why are you so calm?" And she said, "I've been thinking of what makes you so calm, and I think that it is your faith that makes you so calm when all these things are happening all around us." And isn't that true? The world can go crazy. LA is burning right now as we speak. But as Christians, do we fear? Are we uncertain about what's going to happen to this world and how it's going to end? We are not. We are quite sure of how it's going to end, therefore we are not as worried for ourselves, right? Because we know how it's going to play out, how it began, what's happening now, and how it's going to happen, what's going to happen in the end. And so, looking at this, we're not saying, I know what's going to happen. It is within my capacity to make changes or to control things, but I know who is in control. And therefore, I can have this assurance. Not because of what I'm able to do, but because I know who is in control of everything as we speak. So, our faith provides stability even in chaotic times. It's like a man who plays chess, right? As a person, if you're a newcomer to the chess game, what do you think? You're thinking of what is your next move, right? But whereas a seasoned chess player is already thinking about 10 moves ahead of you. And that's who we have that is in control. It is not us, it is God. God knows what's happening. God knows what's happening with your life, with the lives of your children, and He knows exactly how to turn them back to Him. And therefore, we look at God as our anchor as well. And so, how do we respond to uncertainty? I like to watch those video clips of big ships, throwing down their anchor and how their anchor actually works under the sea, right? And as Christians, something that we need to do is we need to be anchored on something or someone. Definitely someone, right? Someone that has the capacity to hold us there, keep us there, center us, even when the world is spinning all around us. And therefore, we are to anchor our life on God's promises. We're to choose faith over fear. Because when uncertainty arises, the thing that we used to do is we begin to panic, right? I remember a few friends of ours, we got together, we went to this waterfall, and for some reason they thought that I could swim, but I can't. And so on the top of the waterfall, a friend was, we were playing, and he suddenly pushed me down. And I went swimming down into the waterfall, not knowing how to dive, not knowing how to swim. And so I thought to myself, as I was falling down with nothing holding me back, I was like, okay, I'm dying. What should I do? So the first response is, as soon as I hit with the water, I'm going to, waddle and swing my arms around and kick, do whatever I can to stay afloat. That's what I thought. And I thought of doing that, but I began to think, all right, let me just be in control of this situation. Let me see how deep I go. And once the speed of me going down slowly subsides, let me try to pull myself up from there. And so I hit the water, and it was painful. And I went down, and then the speed began to slow down. And when it began to slow down, I began to kick my hands around, and I kick my feet, and begin to, somehow wave my hand back and forth, up and down. And I began to feel myself floating higher and higher. And as I floated up, and I thought to myself, this is a good strategy to be calm. Let's see if I can get my neck above the waters. And so that was the goal. Nothing else but just to put my neck above the waters. And I just did that. And from that day on, I still don't know how to swim, but I know how to float, right? So, we need to choose faith over fear and act in obedience. Why do we obey God's commands? It's not because we're trying to find favor with Him, but because we already have found favor with God. God has already saved us. He loved us unconditionally. But to stay in His love, what do? We respond to His love through obedience, and by obeying, our faith grows in Him. It's almost like telling your child, right? If you play piano for 30 minutes, after you do that, I'll give you 5 Pringles. Not 5 whole, but 5 little pieces of Pringles, right? That's the reward. And so they look really unhappy. They look at you, they're not smiling. Sometimes the tears are coming out of their eyes, and they play the piano for 30 minutes. And after that, what do? You actually give them the Pringles, and what does that do to them? they begin to smile. And the next time you tell them, do they still fight back as much? No. They actually ask for more Pringles the next time, right? So obedience is very important. There has to be a response to God's love, right? And so, what are the steps that we can take so that we may have faith in times of uncertainty? Firstly, daily devotion. Is that something that we do daily? It is something that we should do daily, right? As Christians, a daily devotion. What does that mean? Daily devotion is basically a connection with God. Being connected to God daily helps a lot. Secondly, surround yourself with mature believers. I look at this church and I go, I'm very happy because you got young people, you got older people, you got people that are a bit more experienced, and you got people from all age groups. And it's very, very important for young people to be in a church where there are older people around them. I was once young, not as young anymore, but I still feel young. I've never passed the age of 18 mentally, but physically, I'm somewhere in my 50s. But in saying that, when you're younger, who do you want to play with? People that are of your own age. Who do you want to associate with? People that are of your own age. Who do you want to go to church with, where there are more young people, right? One thing that I cannot forget is when I first came to Australia and I was in Ringwood, and in Ringwood there used to be a lot of young people. But suddenly, a year or two into me being in Ringwood, what happened was a lot of young people left to go to younger churches. And Lamnu and I thought, what do we do? People our age group are moving somewhere else. Should we move somewhere else? But then we thought, this is what we're going to do. Yes, people of our own age are moving out. We're going to stay, put here. We're going to stay here. We're going to do what we can to help the church out. And in doing so, what we have gained is that when we go through patches of difficulty, whether it's in our marriage, whether it's in our personal lives, we always have someone that we respect, that we can go and talk to. And there is so much wisdom in a church where there are people that are, maybe a little bit or more older than us, right? And that's why it's vital for young people to stay in a church where there are people that are older than them, and especially in a church where their parents are. And I say that because of this. When you're doing something, when a young person does something in a church, in a youth church, who is the most happy? Maybe the pastor, right? But when young people actually take responsibility in a church like this, where their parents are, who do you think is really proud? Their parents, right? The parents, to see your child leading out in different departments in Sabbath school and song and service and music and in all these areas, it brings so much joy to the parents because they could see their prayers for you, the investments in your life. God has made it fruitful. And not only that, because one day you're going to be a mother and a father too. And you would want your child to grow up in front of you and start taking responsibility in a church and start leading you and guiding you back, right? So, to have some sort of certainty, to have faith, you need devotional time, you need to surround yourself with mature Christians, and you need to daily reflect on God's faithfulness. Has God been faithful to your life? God has been faithful to me. I haven't been faithful to him much, but he has, right? And we are to focus on God's promises. As we are promised in Proverbs, it says, he will make your path straight. I don't know about you, but walking in a fine, straight path really is a lot more helpful than having to cut corners and zigzag along life's pathways, right? And so we are called to trust God in the mid of chaos. And we can do that by doing this 4 simple steps. There may be more, but these are really good 4 simple steps that can really help us out. And allow me to end with this, because I don't want the young people thinking this guy preached too long. Next time we won't give him time anymore. So there's this story about a man who went on a mission in the new, it's a place called Hebrides, somewhere in Scotland, right? So what this man was doing is he was translating the New Testament into one of the native languages there. And so he was finding it quite difficult to find to find the equivalent word for faith or belief. And this man's name was John G. Paton. And so he was considering that these words appear, given that faith and belief appear so often in the New Testament, he's struggling. And so he's thinking, why am I struggling? Why don't they have the word for this, or the word equivalent to the word faith or belief? So one day, when Dr. Paton was in his study, he heard a knock on his door, and it was one of his native evangelists. He has been preaching all around the country, and he has come back, and he's here to visit him at his home. And so Dr. Paton invited him in and said, come have a seat. And so he offered him a seat. And so this man, he came into the house, and he looked at the chair, and he began to just sit on that chair and put his whole weight on it. And he relaxed. And looking at what that meant, he began to think of a word in the native language that meant, I am resting my whole weight upon these chairs. And so immediately, the scholar, Dr. Paton, he had the word that he's been looking for, that he's been searching for the word equivalent to faith and belief. And so he translated the word as resting one's whole weight upon God. Isn't that a beautiful story? Right? And that is something that God calls us to do, right, in this text. Where in the text it says, trust in the Lord with how much of your heart? All your heart. Lean not to your own understanding. In all of your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. We're 2 weeks into this new year, and the invitation is this today. Whatever your problem is, whatever your uncertainties are, whether it's a daughter who is unwell, a friend that is recovering from sickness, a son or daughter who has walked out of church, or a friend that is not certain about his faith or belief, what can you do? It is painful. It is a struggle. But the invitation is this: put your whole body weight upon God. Cast all that burden upon Him. Rely on Him. Do not trust in your own abilities. And if you can do that, God's promise is that He will make your path straight. He will lead your friend back to the church. He will lead your son, your daughter back to Him. He will bring healing back into the life of your loved one. Whatever is your burden today, I pray that you're able to leave it all and cast it all on God, who is faithful. Thank you.